Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief. It's our weekly show about politics. I'm Marcos Molitzis. I'm here with Carrie Alavelt from rainy California. It's apparently a thing now. Rain. Still trying to adjust.
Not just rain, but water.
It's definitely odd. And welcome to this week's show. Today we are going to be talking about Republicans' new message. We all hear about how Republicans used to be so optimistic, right? Ronald Reagan's Morning in America. And yet now it's something completely different. Donald Trump started the trend back in 2016. Everybody thought, oh, he can't win because he's so negative. He won, and now the whole Republican Party has been jumping aboard. Carrie, you've been on the front row of this. You've been covering this for Daily Kos. How have you survived?
Well,
the darkness.
Well, I mean, you can't. You. First of all, the election is over a year and a half away, right? That's part of what makes this stuff palatable, because it is truly dark and batshit crazy. Okay, and so like at this point, there is a piece of us like just for survival mode, because this is going to get so crazy. We have no idea where the Republican Party is going. I mean, a former president of the United States could have like several criminal indictments lodged against him within the next, several months. So we've never been here before, right? But I mean, this stuff is dark. Where Republicans want to take us is very dark. And I think at this point, like, you kind of have to laugh at it a little bit, because you can't get too serious too quick. Like, this is a marathon, Carrie, not a sprint. Yeah.
Let me interject. So you say this stuff. Let's define this stuff for our listeners.
Yeah, this stuff. Okay, so first of all, I just to your point about Ronald Reagan, I think the Republican Party, which pretty until about 2016 hadn't had a fresh idea since Ronald Reagan. I mean, everything was about like Ronald Reagan, the party of Ronald Reagan, cutting taxes and all this stuff, like trickle down economics. And they couldn't mention Ronald Reagan enough. Okay, they finally killed Ronald Reagan. Like, Trump finally put the nail in the coffin of Ronald Reagan, because Ronald Reagan was all about Morning in America, the shining city on the hill, the optimism of the future of the country. And Donald Trump, pretty introduced introduced us in 2017, when he first took office, to the darkness of his administration and what he saw. When he talked about the American carnage, right? Do you remember him talking about American carnage? That it ends right here, right now. And he just gave this really like gloomy picture of life in America today. And what he's done, and what the Republican Party has done, is instead of actually ending American carnage, they've sort of like lived into his portrait of American carnage.
So Carrie, his book when he ran for president in 2016 was Great Again: How to Fix Our Crippled America. Our crippled America.
Okay. Well, there you have it.
It was a definite vibe for sure.
Yeah. No, it was a definite vibe. I mean, and that a lot of people really enjoyed, apparently. It's like clearly like a dim worldview that a lot of people felt like things were going badly, and it definitely caught their attention. He tapped into something that was there. He did not create this strain of American darkness. He tapped into it, but now the Republican Party is really all about it. So when I say this stuff, I mean this really dark, ominous picture of a future of America. And they say elections are always about the future. So if you're voting for the future, and what you're getting from this Republican Party is this incredibly dark and dismal future that they're painting, like, it seems, I mean, they're going to have to like get a majority of Americans to buy into that, or at least enough Americans to win the Electoral College, which seems, how many people, I mean, this certainly has an appeal, right?
So
Donald Trump certainly has an appeal. Yeah,
let's say
go to a
the
clip.
electoral consequences, because that's definitely a conversation we should have. But let's we have what did Walter, our producer, call this?
Yeah, I can't remember what he called it. Walter, are you
Walter.
there somewhere in the background? Okay, well he may chime in with what he called this, but we have the woke apocalypse montage.
Oh yeah.
So this is going to be, you're going to hear from this. Now Governor of Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, right? Former UN ambassador and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley,
Who's
Florida Governor,
president.
right? Who's running for president, right? Exactly. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump, and you'll notice the darkness that sort of like it clouds everything that they're saying. And even Haley, who is kind of considered like an more establishment type candidate for president right now, rather than like the MAGA the MAGA campaigns being sort of pushed forward by DeSantis and Trump. And even though DeSantis hasn't announced, everybody assumes he will. But even someone like Haley gets caught in this really dark, it's like they can no longer just skip over the darkness that it has infected the entire Republican Party. Okay, go ahead and roll with woke apocalypse montage right now, Walter, if you will.
Washington taxes you and lights your hard-earned money on fire. But you get crushed with high gas prices, empty grocery shelves, and our children are taught to hate one another on account of their race. The dividing line in America is no longer between right or left. The choice is between normal or crazy.
But there's something else that's eating away at our national core. On Biden and Harris's watch, a self-loathing has swept our country. America is on a path of doubt, division, and self-destruction, a path of fading patriotism and weakening power. The stakes are nothing less than our survival.
We say very clearly in the state of Florida, we will fight the woke in the legislature, we will fight the woke in education, we will fight the woke in the businesses. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Our state is where woke goes to die.
Your warrior. I am your justice. For those who have been wronged and betrayed, of which there are many people out there that have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution.
Your retribution.
And we should say that line got a lot of attention when he delivered it a few weeks ago. He delivered it in Waco again, and this is the audio from Waco in where he held a rally, Waco, Texas, where he held a rally over the weekend. So that is, "I am your retribution" is a line that is now like signature Trump and is going to clearly be repeated at every Trump, event, or major rally.
Yeah, all of this, that montage, it actually makes crippled America seem tame in comparison. And it's odd that really between 2016 and now, the only thing that, Donald Trump was president for 4 of those years. And yet apparently 1 year of Joe Biden, and things are cataclysmically worse. And yet, Carrie, this is, I know you brought up the electoral ramifications earlier, and maybe I'm bringing them up too early right now, but I think it's sort of, this is what Trump and the Republican Party have been talking about the last 3 election cycles. They've lost all 3 of those cycles, Carrie. They are doubling and tripling and quadrupling and I guess quadrupling down on a rhetoric that does not sell. It does not motivate their voters to turn out and vote. It motivates our side because that shit is scary. The stuff that they're selling is fucking terrifying. But it doesn't motivate their side. Why they got what they wanted. They got the Supreme Court. They got the elimination of Roe v. Wade. They got tax cuts for billionaires. I mean, they got almost everything that they wanted. What are they so angry about?
Well, I
rhetorical question.
Rhetorical question, right? I mean, the question, so I think, when I hear someone like Haley, I mean, first of all, there's totally mockable stuff in there, right? I mean, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the great, like, new generation of Republicans, right? She's telling, you're going to be crushed. They're lighting they're lighting your money on fire. I mean, let's see. And there was another quote she had. Hold on. The Biden administration seems more interested in woke fantasies than the hard realities Americans face every day. Most Americans simply want to live their lives in freedom and peace, but we are under attack in a left-wing culture war we didn't start and never wanted to fight. That's also Sarah Huckabee Sanders, right? That was her response to Joe Biden's State of the Union. And I mean, you're missing, unfortunately, none of you, well, most of the podcast, the listeners, they're not going to get the benefit of seeing her extremely dark delivery of this, like the facial expression. I mean, if I'd been in a dark alley, I would have run the other way. So anyway, but then you listen to someone like Haley do this, and I just think, it's impossible. What Haley doing it means. I mean, she talked about how this comes down to nothing less than survival, right? What they are all getting to is that the left, that the woke mob, the threat is existential, right? It's an existential threat. That is exactly what they're getting at. And they're all doing it with slightly different, words and whatever catchphrases, but they're all talking about the existential threat that Democrats, essentially, anyone who doesn't vote MAGA, poses to the country. And when I hear someone like Haley doing that, I think it's just such a indication that the Republican Party, you can no longer speak to base Republican voters anymore unless you speak to this sort of very basic feeling of doom and gloom. Like, you can't deliver a hopeful message anymore because Trump has so infected the MAGA base, the GOP base, that in order to reach them, you have to reach them with this type of rhetoric. You can't reach them with, with talk about the better angels of our America. They don't believe in it. It's not what their the mindset they live in. And so you have to take a stab at this really dark doom and gloom type stuff in order to reach the Republican base.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's interesting, though, is that the Republican electoral problems right now stem in the suburbs. Like, they've lost urban America. They've already consolidated rural America. So the real battleground is in the suburbs. And this language does not land with generally, middle class to upper middle class, white, college educated men and women. And we've seen women trending Democratic, suburban, college educated white women have been trending Democratic over the last few cycles. Virginia showed that they can still vote Republican, so they're certainly not locked down for the Democrats, but they certainly have voted Democratic in the last 3 federal elections. There are hints right now that college educated suburban men, white men, may be turning in it. Big part is this doom and gloom. And if you look at the actual metrics of America, it's unsupported. Unemployment's at a 60-year low. Yes, inflation is up, but buying power is also up. We're in finally we're in a time of peace. Like, we're not engaged in any major war at this time. So just objectively, things aren't that bad. So you have to create the perception of doom and gloom. And this is where the QAnon and the conspiracy theories really, really start coming in. I mean, just this past weekend, a staffer for Rand Paul was brutally stabbed in Washington, D.C. in broad daylight. It was, from all indications, it was a robbery, or maybe, the man had just been released from prison. Maybe it was mental illness, maybe it was robbery, who knows at this time. But was wrong place, wrong time, was stabbed. And the commentary on Twitter had suddenly turned into, this is more evidence that the left wants to kill us all. And if we don't start killing them first, we're in trouble. So this is the shots of the Civil War, and it was hundreds of these comments, and um, I want to laugh at a lot of the stuff that they said, but they are feeding into something that is incredibly dangerous and toxic and noxious. And there is a now, I mean, it's a very clear effort to reshape reality and do so in a way that supports this idea that, oh no, they're under attack, their freedoms are under attack, when in reality, again, it's Ron DeSantis banning books in Florida libraries and talking about kicking out all liberals from state colleges. It's Idaho, trying to pass a law banning its people from leaving the state to have an abortion. I mean, if you talk about actual leaving or losing freedoms, it is not liberals who are a threat to freedom. It's quite the opposite, in fact. And so they've created this alternate reality and these conspiracy theories and this eliminationist rhetoric that feeds the beast. And Carrie, we've talked about before, historically, the Republican Party was split into three factions. There was the populist sort of Tea Party faction. There was the Christian conservatives, and then there was the Wall Street liberals. And if you ran for the Republican nomination, you pick the lane, and then you try to muscle out everybody else in your lane. And then at that point, it's who's left standing. And that was sort of the approach. The establishment candidate usually won: John McCain, Mitt Romney, George Bush again. And so Donald Trump really broke that mold. And it's really fascinating right now that, like, Nikki Haley could not be more establishment. She is not one of the MAGA crowd. And yet she thinks that she has to run for the same voters that Donald Trump already clearly has locked up. They're not even trying to find a new lane to run in. Does that lane even exist anymore?
Well, Haley thinks she can, she's got to rile up the base to some extent. But then she is, carving, trying to carve a little bit of her own. Like she's not a Putin lover, right? She isn't going to give away Ukraine to Putin, bar. Right? Okay. Lowest bar, but she's like, no, we need to be in Ukraine. I mean, I'll give her credit for this. We need to be in Ukraine. This is an important fight. And after Ron DeSantis came back, he's of course walked this back now, but after he came out and said, well, it's just a territorial dispute, and what's happening in the conflict in Ukraine and Russia, and it's not part of the United States interests to be over there, to be supplying guns and ammunition, as well as equipment, etc., training. So he didn't actually pledge to stop everything, but he was essentially hugging Trump's position on it, which is it's not an important interest to ICE, a vital, quote unquote, vital U.S. interest, as he said. Well, Haley used that to say, oh no, it is indeed an interest. So she used that to differentiate herself. But they still believe that the only way that they have any chance of getting anywhere is to at least tap into a portion of this doom and gloom existential threat that animates so many Republican voters now. I have to say, you talk about the attack on freedoms. There is no party that has launched more of an attack on American freedoms than the Republican Party at this point. And they are attacking everything. They are attacking, you're hearing a lot of anti-trans stuff. So they're attacking transgender freedoms. They're attacking reproductive freedoms. They are attacking First Amendment rights, no drag shows, right? Freedom of speech. They're attacking freedom of information. If there's one person that objects to a book in Ron DeSantis's Florida, then that book gets pulled, and the rest of the public doesn't get to see it. I mean, so the book bans and the censorship, they're attacking Black voters, people of color, with their attacks on voting rights. So they are attacking everybody simultaneously. I think that there's this whole thing about Republicans selling this anti-trans stuff as though, and I talked a little bit about this with Drew last week, but this anti-trans, heinous attacks on transgender Americans, frankly, and that's going to work with suburban voters and maybe particularly suburban women. Okay. You can't attack reproductive freedom and think that you're going to turn anti-trans stuff into a wedge issue. I don't even think they're right about the basic idea that that attacking trans folks is a good wedge issue for them.
It hasn't been. It never has been.
No, it never has been. They keep trying and trying and trying, and they don't win anything on it. It was going to win, Michigan for Trump in 2020. Well, no, it definitely did not win Michigan for Trump in 2020. I mean, these are places where they tried to play, and it didn't work.
North Carolina, Arizona.
Carolina, Arizona. I think at one point I'm pretty sure it was in Kentucky where they thought they were going to defeat Andy Beshear in his first election, right? And they were going to use trans issues to do it. Well, guess what? That didn't work either. I mean, it's just like over and over again, there's people who are like, well, this is the issue that's going to do it. And then it doesn't work. So I don't even think on its face, anti-trans stuff, the hatred that they're spewing about transgender Americans is really a good suburban issue for them. But forget about that. Even if it were, there's no way that they can attack everybody at the same time, all these disenfranchised groups at the same time, and then cleave off like some portion of suburban women or suburban voters because they're minimally, upset about trans issues or something like that. I mean, it's just crazy. And they think it's their 2004 gay marriage ban. It's not. It's, the gay marriage ban sort of as a cultural issue existed in isolation. So, maybe they cleaved off some Democrat. I still don't believe that bullshit. Yeah. But anyway.
And it's so counterproductive that it actually drowns out the real arguments that they might have. So, for example, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed a few weeks ago. It collapsed. The reason's pretty simple. It put most of its assets into mortgage-backed securities that were paying out 2%-ish, 2 to 3%. Inflation's at 5%, which put that investment underwater. They were not liquid. They weren't insolvent. They had still, hundreds of billions of dollars of these treasuries, but they were underwater, and that put them in problems. So the actual argument that a competent Republican Party would say is that the banks went under because of Joe Biden's inflation. That would be it. And it's too simplistic and stupid and whatever else. But from a political sense, okay, that would make sense. In fact, that's what Kevin McCarthy urged his caucus to say after a meeting where they discussed messaging on the bank's failure. After that meeting, all these people came out and they were talking about woke banks. That was their messaging. Woke bank. They had a real argument to make. Bullshitty, I think, but it was at least it had some semblance of reality and it tied into economic issues. But they can no longer even speak to those economic issues because the culture war stuff, the doom and gloom stuff, is so overpowering to their central nervous system or something. So everything becomes woke. And then we've had all these hilarious, viral clips of people asking a Fox News host, what do they mean by woke? And she doesn't know. And asking people at Trump events what woke means. They don't know. They don't woke. Just woke is the new liberal. That's all it is. It's this meaningless word. And what's funny is that we've also seen polling that shows that the word woke polls actually very well. And if you ask the average American what woke means, it just means compassionate.
Yeah, a majority of Americans sort of view it in a positive light.
So they have gone all in on their weird, undefinable, I don't want to say definition of woke, because they don't even have a definition of woke, this feeling of woke. This feeling. This feeling of woke. When people have, the broader electorate has this defined sense of what, woke just being, like not being an asshole. That's really what really woke is. In essence,
what a crazy idea.
And so electorally,
can I just say I'm looking
please.
at this Rolling Stone article right now that said young Republicans are begging party elders to stop saying woke. The next generation of conservatives support their party's culture war, but they hate the way their elder Republicans describe them. So, you're already alienating a generation, an up and coming generation of. It's like, please stop saying this word. I mean, not only can you not define it, but young people hate it. Like, it's like, anyway, it's just, I cannot imagine. It's a little like CRT in the sense that it speaks to their like grievance base, but it doesn't speak to anybody else.
No, and in fact,
I call it the Republicans 50 minus strategy.
Yes,
as opposed to the 51+1 strategy that you're supposed to use to like win elections. Republicans now have a 50 minus strategy. I don't know if it's 50 minus 1 or 50 minus 10, but it's 50 minus.
I mean, it's they used to speak in dog whistles, right? The idea that you would code your racism in ways that the broader public wouldn't realize, or at least could pretend did not exist. That's how they coded their racism back in the day. Now they have like outward code, CRT and there's environmental investing, EGB, and they're throwing out all these acronyms. People don't know what
because Lord knows. Well, the Lord knows that there's nothing like acronyms, like Washington acronyms, to speak to people.
And it's not even like Washington acronyms. It's like their own little like fever swamp acronyms. And so you ask the average person what CRT is, they have no freaking clue. Like, they were good at veiling their racism in the past. I mean, it was all like welfare queens. That was what it was. And now it's, the way they veil it is by using code words that nobody else understands. That's not dog whistles. The dog hears that whistle. What they're whistling now, nobody hears it except for people on 8chan and their fever swamps. And congratulations, I guess. I mean, but it does not grow that electorate. And Carrie, I mean, if they cannot escape this, I mean, we were talking about Tucker Carlson talking about sexy M&Ms, right? Like, they actually don't have real things to point to talk about how America is this cesspool of people divided against each other that they're talking about. They don't actually, that does not exist. So they have to create this stuff, which is why Tucker Carlson freaks out because Eminem retired the sexy Eminem cartoon character, right? I mean, the stuff that shows up on Tucker Carlson's show proves.
I mean, I hadn't even heard about that. I hadn't even heard about that. I mean, and I pay, like.
Oh my God.
No,
it's been multiple episodes on sexy Eminem character has been retired.
The sexy Eminem character. Well, I am sad to have missed that.
And by sexy, she's wearing high heels. So apparently, and then they changed her to have sneakers, so no longer sexy. And apparently, I don't want to know what Tucker Carlson did with videos of high heel Eminem because he was really pissed.
He's really thrown by it.
Oh,
but that's the point. I mean, okay, so first of all, I don't spend a lot of time on Fox News because it's just like, that's a whole nother world, right? I'm usually dealing with like the politicians, right? And the Fox News is like Tucker, all that stuff. I catch it, some of it here and there, but like he spent episodes on that, episodes, plural. And, there's a lot of, I don't know, a lot of talk about this person, this unsexy character, the desexualization of the Eminem character, whatever. I don't even know. That's why when they start spewing this stuff to a general election audience, no one understands what they're saying except for their base, right? So they may be trying to win a primary right now. I mean, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about with Maggie New York Times Maggie Haberman, who a lot of. Yeah, whatever. I don't know. But a lot of progressives really despise her for her coverage of Trump and whatever. But the point was that she does kind of know what's going on in the Republican Party a lot of times, especially in the presidential election and the primary. And she's talking to Hacks on Tap about how Ron DeSantis only talks to like Rupert Murdoch properties. I don't know why I can't talk. I've had this problem for the past couple of episodes. Anyway, but he like only talks to he only gives interviews to Fox News, the New York Post. I don't know. What are the other Murdoch
Wall Street
properties?
Journal? I don't know.
I don't. Yeah, maybe the Wall Street Journal. But like, how are you going to conduct a general election candidacy when at some point you're going to have to branch out beyond this friendly, these friendly venues that you're going to, and try to talk to just if he managed to win the primary, like try to talk to Americans who aren't steeped in all of this, alphabet soup of the swamp. I mean, I don't know, whatever, the GOP swamp. Like, so.
And I would even argue that it's actually losing the base. It's your strategy of, 50 minus. It's actually eroding, because if they start losing suburban college educated white men, because they're going like, what is this nonsense that we're hearing? Like they'll probably respond to inflation. They're not going to respond to CRT, woke banks, because it's literal nonsense. It means nothing. And so we're heading into an election that I mean, they've lost the last 3 elections. They lost a midterm election that they should have won by a lot. So this is not even high turnout elections. A midterm election with the president in the White House always means, like, not always, but almost always means landslide loss for the party in the White House. And it did not happen this time. We actually gained seats in the Senate and only lost seats in the House because of gerrymandering, because of the redrawing of districts. That is not going to help them next year. I think we're going to take back the House. The Senate is a tough map, but Republicans are doing everything possible to keep this a incredibly competitive race, even in places like Montana and West Virginia, because like you said, Carrie, the efforts on trans rights have lost in places like Kentucky and North Carolina, in Arizona, which, it's probably still a slight tinge red at this point, but Republican candidates, the quality of their candidates has been so poor that we've been able to win the last two election cycles in Arizona and in Michigan, which, Trump won in 2016, and suddenly we're winning blowout victories, right? Because people are going like, wait a second, these Republicans are whack. And so their inability to course correct is absolutely amazing. And that's why, of all the 4 people that we played earlier today, like Nikki Haley still is the one that blows me away, because she's got nothing in the polls right now. She's like at 1%, and that's probably statistical error.
More like 4%.
Oh, 4. And so
quit underselling Haley.
There is a place to say, okay, I'm not going to compete for the Trump crowd, and DeSantis is going after them, so they're going to go after each other's throats and tear each other apart. Maybe I can carve out something of more of an optimistic track and hearken both to the history of the Republican Party, at least a fake history, right? The pretend morning and the Reagan stuff, while reaching, trying to be palatable to suburban voters, Wall Street voters, that crowd who will, voting for a brown woman looks like, yeah, we're not racist. Like, we're not sexist. We're different. And Republicans are, they're instead she's jumping in the same crowded pool with the rest of her party's trash, and doesn't see a way out of avoiding that. Has to use that, that apocalyptic rhetoric, and that is both scary because, again, like I said, the Republican base is amped up by that and will be violent about that. And they have been violent. And I think that's only going to get worse. But it also, from an electoral standpoint, it's actually another saving grace. I mean, that's what may bail out Joe Biden's reelection campaign. We may hold the Senate despite a brutal, brutal map. And it may allow us to get an even bigger majority in the House, making state legislators, governorships, all that stuff, because they can't focus on the thing people want to talk about. They can only talk about what their crazy base is focused on. And there's nothing like it on our side. And I don't think there's ever been anything on the liberal side, on the Democratic side. And I don't even remember the Republican Party being this beholden to its, fringe. And they are a fringe. To the point, like I said, it was always the establishment candidate that emerged from their primaries until Trump came along. So it's going to be an interesting couple of years. And I do wonder if at some point they can get out of that and start speaking more optimistically, or if they're just going to keep one-upping themselves with their vision of this dystopian American carnage that does not exist.
Right, right. Well, I tell you, I was just sort of looking up this. So first of all, talking about the Senate map, the Senate Republicans can't get far enough away from House Republicans. I mean, it's just every new thing, them backing, this idea of them backing when DeSantis came out and said, oh, well, it's just a territorial dispute. House Republicans are all over that. They're all over like, yeah, we shouldn't be involved in that. We're not going to approve more money for it, all that stuff, And Senate Republicans are like dying, right? They're like, this is exactly how we ended up in a place where we lost, every state.
They should be the majority. They should.
Yeah, we were slated to win in 2022, right? So it doesn't matter like whether, I mean, they're fighting amongst themselves. They're on every issue. The anti-woke bank stuff is just ridiculous. I mean, it's like goes on and on. Every new issue that comes up, House Republicans trying to get subpoena Alvin Bragg, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, right, in order to like get him to Congress to infringe on his, what is it actually not a federal investigation, but a state local investigation, right? He's a local prosecutor, state prosecutor. They have no jurisdiction over him, and they asked someone like, John Thune about that. He's sort of, helming the Senate Republican caucus right now while McConnell has been out after this injury he sustained. And when he tripped and he got a concussion and broke a rib or something, fractured a rib, I think. But anyway, he's expected to be back soon. But still, you asked John Thune about this, and he says, well, I don't know that he obviously didn't want to get on the GOP talking points about this, although he kind of like echoed one of them, which is, I don't know if this is where, a local prosecutor should be putting his time and effort when there's, crime rates and other crimes going on in Manhattan and New York, et cetera. But in terms of them trying to subpoena him to come before Congress, I don't know, but like, it's just like doesn't want any piece of what House Republicans are doing because it's always so stupid and like asinine and counter, it is going to run it as a roadblock in terms of them having sustained, picking up the one or two. They need to pick up 2 seats, right? Because we're 1 seat up right now, so pick up 2 seats But let's just say this though, the base of the Republican Party is not where 7 Republicans are. And here's the clearest indication of that. If you look at the polls in Pennsylvania right now, Doug Mastriano is winning the most recent polls. Doug Mastriano is just the one who like flamed out as the GOP nominee in Pennsylvania. And that's in the midterm, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we ended up with Democratic Senator John Fetterman, right? So, he's back. He's like, losing once wasn't good enough for me. I'm back. I'm going to get in this primary to try and win in 24. And he's back. And I think the pollster was looking at him and David McCormick, who was the other GOP, one of the other Republican candidates. And he was like, kind of echoing some of the MAGA stuff, but was like a much more sort of normal Republican. He got caught up into some of that stuff, but he was kind of like the more normal, like business guy that you would think of old school Republicans as. And he lost to Mastriano, and he's still losing to him in the most recent polls. So this is where the base of the party is, regardless of the fact that Senate Republicans don't want to believe it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me, but there was a poll that showed that Republicans, by a significant majority, would rather nominate somebody that agreed with them rather than somebody who was more electable. And I mean, obviously, we don't need a poll to tell us that because we see it time and time again. And even with the school shooting in Tennessee earlier this week, I mean, we saw that Republicans have had a lot of success just by don't politicize it, stop politicizing it, and then letting the clock run out until, the next tragedy. This time they're all, it's all woke stuff and it's trans and, trying to blame it on the fact that the shooter, is that confirmed that she was trans? Um, oh, you're muted, Carrie.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I just want to be, really careful here. The shooter's name was Audrey. First name was Audrey, and he went by he, him pronouns. Okay.
Okay.
So I don't know that we really know if that person identified as trans. What we do know is their first name was Audrey, and he went by he, him pronouns. That's all we know,
So
as far as I can tell.
So Republicans, instead of trying to, do the usual thoughts and prayers, don't politicize the issue, they've actually activated their culture war machine to blame this on trans. Whether it's true or not, we don't know as we record this, but that's what they're saying. And again, it's activating a tactic and a message that just resonates very, very poorly. And already, gun massacres aren't the most popular thing for the Republican Party, which is why they usually try to just to keep their mouths shut and make it go away. But this time they're not. They're like leaning into it heavily, and I actually think it's gonna again backfire on them, and even in an even bigger way. So this is where we are headed for the next 2 years. So yeah, you want to wrap this up because
well, let me just say a couple things about this. So first of all, what we know is that it doesn't matter what the gender of the shooter is. If they hadn't been able to get a chance to get their hands on a gun, if we were regulating guns, if Republicans were willing to regulate guns and specifically outlaw assault weapons, then the shooter wouldn't have been able to kill at such a rapid pace, and many mass shooters would not be able to kill at such a rapid pace.
We don't want anybody to have those
right.
guns.
I don't care what gender they are. Let me just also say, someone like JD Vance tweets out, if early reports are accurate that a trans shooter targeted a Christian school, there needs to be a lot of soul searching on the extreme left. That's Senator JD Vance of Ohio. Okay. Let me just say, how about a lot of soul searching on behalf of men? Because at least 95% of mass shootings are perpetrated by men. Okay. So if JD Vance wants to fixate on gender as an issue in terms of let's fixate on men, which is still stupid. We can't, look, if there are problems with, maleness and masculinity, if that's somehow playing into mass shootings, we can't fix that before we can fix whether or not they can get their hands on guns. But
so Carrie, I searched my soul. Yeah. I did some soul searching. And I've decided that the best way to protect Christian schools from nefarious mass shooters is to ban assault weapons. That's what my soul tells me.
I think your soul has its finger on the pulse. That's what I think.
Okay.
There you go.
Again, because now we care because it's a Christian school, I guess. And before it didn't matter. No soul searching needed because before they weren't Christian schools. But now my soul tells me we should do what we keep saying we should do, and is protect all schools and all children. And this is where the Republicans, instead of talking about the children, they're gonna turn this into a culture war. And so, Carrie, that's our show for today.
Yeah.
But I know we're going to be talking about this a lot because that rhetoric they seem to be on a downward spiral. They have to one up each other about how horrible they can be. And so it's bound to be ugly and probably a little depressing. But it certainly is going to have serious consequences for the Republican Party, I think, long term, both in their ability to grow as a movement and as a party and their electoral performance next year. So that's what I expect and kind of like what I hope too. Yeah. Because the alternative is just too.
Our hearts go out to all those, to the victims and the victims' families in that shooting. This is just a tragic occurrence that keeps reoccurring at more rapid pace all the time. And as long as Republicans control Congress or can filibuster, through 60 vote majority, through needing their votes in the Senate, if they can filibuster, then we're not going to be able to get something like an assault weapons ban through. It's just that simple. And there's no other way to stop this carnage other than having an assault weapons ban and stricter laws on background checks.
That is our show for today. Thank you so much, Carrie. Thank you so much for being my lovely co-host as always. Thanks to Walter for producing this show and everybody that helps behind the scenes, like Paul. So thanks everybody for listening, watching, reading, supporting both Daily Kos, this podcast, and the local Democratic candidates and everything that you do for our democracy, because this fight is ongoing, never ending. They don't let up. We can't either. So thank you for being fellow travelers in this battle for the soul of our democracy. Thanks so much. Everybody have a wonderful week. Catch you all next week.